Hello and welcome back. In this second part of the demonstration on file and folder automation, we'll complete the task of automating the use case presented in the first part. As such, you'll get to iterate through folders and see how you can rename, move, and delete them. But first things first, let's remember in what business situation we are. In the first part of the demo, you've learned how to select and create a folder and extract the contents of an archive, whilst using key VB.NET methods. We used a browse for file activity to enable the users of this automation to choose the zip files that they wish to work with. Then a get file info activity to convert the path from the browse for folder activity into a file object. After that, with the information stored in the file object, we created new folder paths to be later used with the multiple assign activity. We then extracted the zipped contents with an extract unzip files action. And finally, we used a create folder activity to generate the folder to hold all of the contracts. In other words, the first part of this demo focused on building the folder architecture to achieve the end goal for this use case: to move all of the contracts from the zip file to a folder which will only hold them and to rename them. Currently, they're in separate folders, each dedicated to their corresponding companies. Before continuing with the development, let's clear the outputs from the previous run. Now it's time we complete the task. We'll use an iteration to go through all of the files in the folder with the client information. Then sort through them to only move the renamed contracts to the already created folder. And at the end, delete the extracted folder. Now you might have noticed that there are two iteration activities that are specific to working with files and folders. They might sound very similar, but they're different in function. The for each folder in folder activity makes the robot process each folder within a parent folder, allowing for the processing of subfolders as well. By comparison, the for each file in folder activity makes the robot process each file within a parent folder, offering the option to have the files within subfolders enter the loop too. The option to consider subfolders is something that you as an automation developer can choose to enable or not, valid for both activities. Likewise, you can set filters, decide on the processing order based on given sorting criteria, and set the activity to skip an item with denied access or not. Now that you've become more familiar with what we're about to do, let's get going. We'll continue our workflow from the first part of this demo with this for each file in folder activity. Let's change the name to be more intuitive and add a description. We'll iterate through the extracted folder, and here we can add its path. As the folder contains subfolders that hold documents including the contracts that we're interested in, we'll include them by checking this option. Because we know that the contracts are in PDF format, we can narrow down the search and set the filter to .pdf. We'll now add a log message to provide information about the file that is processed with each iteration loop. Let's set the message to current processing file and the current file name. Let's check if the current file is a file info object. So we'll run the project up until this point. We'll go ahead and add a breakpoint, and then debug this file. Like in the previous demo, we choose the client documents.zip file. Then we can make use of the immediate panel and explore what kind of object the current file is. For that, we'll use the getType function. As expected, it's a file info object, and that means that we have access to the name property that provides the current file name. Moreover, we can also choose to get the name of the parent directory with the directory name property, or the full path with the full name property. These are just a few ways to inspect the current file variable and its properties. Now that we've confirmed the type of the object, we can go back to developing the workflow and remove this breakpoint. The next step is to identify the contracts within the pool of documents that we're working with. If we open the project panel and look at how they're named, we can notice that all of them have contract as a key word in their name. So we'll use this as a condition to find them. Once we achieve that, we'll rename and move them to the dedicated folder that we created previously. First, let's add an if activity and rename it. The condition is that the current file name contains the keyword contract. If so, we proceed to rename and move the file. Although there is an activity that does that called rename file, it isn't quite right for us to use. Now, why is that? Well, it's because if we'd rename the file by using this activity, we wouldn't update the info in the file object. Thus, the file object would still hold info about the old version of the file. And we don't want that, as this will cause an error while moving the file. In this case, we can use the move file activity directly. We'll move the file from the old location, provided by the full name property, to the new location containing the new file name. For the new location, we start by providing the contracts folder path, the parent directory of the file. To this, we append current file.directory.name and naturally the current file's name. We can go ahead and rename the activity to be more suggestive. And then run the project. Now let's check the outcome. After refreshing the project panel, we can see that the contracts were separated from the other client documents, in our case some invoices, and moved to their dedicated folder. Next, we'll delete the extracted client documents folder as we don't need it anymore. We do that by using the delete folder activity outside of the iteration. Let's rename it and provide the path of the folder to delete, extracted folder path. Before the final run, let's clean up our space a bit by deleting the extracted folder that we've been working in and the contracts folder. Now we're ready, let's do it. After running the project, you'll notice that the extracted files folder is no longer there. But that's because we deleted it as a last step in the automation. However, look. Here's the contracts folder with all of the contracts inside. And that brings us to the end of this demo. By sticking with us to the end, you learned how to use the for each file in folder activity to iterate through all of the files in the extracted folder, including the subfolders. We also set a filter for the automation to process only PDF files within the folder. To identify the contract files, we added an if activity and set the condition that the file name contains the keyword contract. Then we made use of the move file activity to move and rename files from one location to the other. Finally, you saw how to delete folders when we did so with the extracted folder location. And that's it. You've completed both parts of the Working with Files and Folders demonstration. Awesome job. See you soon and happy automation.